Hello everybody, it's Simon here. Whether you become a systems administrator, a software developer, or something in between, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you will be working with web servers and web server configurations at some point. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about them. Of course, in our lab, we're using Microsoft's Internet Information Service, or IIS. It's quick and easy to make go. It's got a GUI and everything. But as I mentioned, even though our lab is really designed for the purpose of giving you some exposure and build some familiarity with the concept of a web server, I did mention that you're more likely to find Apache and Nginx in the wild when you're on the job. But you may be asking yourself, well, why? And frankly, what's the difference between Apache and Nginx? Well, the reason you're more likely to find them in the wild is they have a huge footprint and have for so many years. Although IIS came out a long time ago, it never really captured a huge amount of market share, especially after a number of, I'm going to call them security issues, arose. And it frankly just isn't the kind of product that a modern web infrastructure would be built on. The Apache web server is the world's most popular web server. It emerged in around 1995 as a series of improvements to the main web server that was out at the time, and that it was, depends on who you ask, but it was either called the CERN HTTP daemon or the NCSA HTTP daemon. CERN being, of course, the organization from which the World Wide Web itself emerged, and the folks who invented the very first web browsers. Apache runs on pretty much every platform you can imagine, from Windows to Linux, of course, to BSD Unix and therefore Mac OS, to even niche operating systems and every commercial Unix that's out there, which is probably a big part of its popularity, its high degree of flexibility. Speaking of flexibility, Apache can be extended through the use of additional modules. Modules that do things like data encryption, data compression, advanced logging, which are all features that we find really useful in really large-scale web server implementations. Now, Apache is developed and maintained by an organization called the Apache Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization that takes donations to maintain projects like the Apache web server. But they also maintain other really important technologies, not just web-related specifically, but other important technologies. You might want to look up other ones that they do. It's really quite interesting. But the upshot of that is that the Apache web server is what we call open source software. It means that you have access to the source code of that software so that you can look at how it works for yourself. You can see what's going on under the hood. You can potentially contribute to that software, add features and functionality, or fix problems, even if you're not part of the core development team. That's one of the big, big positive pluses about open source software. The Nginx web server was released in about 2004, largely in response to some of the performance problems that existed in the Apache web server at the time. And although those problems have by and large been addressed, Nginx is still considered to be a real high-performance web server, which is quite attractive to very large websites. Nginx itself runs on almost as many platforms as the Apache web server, not as many of the sort of smaller niche platforms, but all the big ones, and it has been growing in market share over the years since it's been released. In fact, at this point it's probably almost neck and neck, I'd say, with Apache sort of overall, and that market share has come largely at the cost of some of the smaller web servers and of course IIS. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Nginx being the leading web server just because of the reputation it has for extreme high performance and how important web services are to modern business. Now, The Nginx web server itself has sort of like two tiers. There's a free version just called Nginx, and free being there's no licensing encumbrance, and it is open source for the most part. But there's also a version of it that the company, also called Nginx, which develops and maintains it, sells. It's called Nginx Plus. And this is a version that has a paid support model. Like when you buy this license, you get access to support for this. And a lot of companies really like that kind of support model, knowing they can go to this company and get support. And if their website is really mission critical, that is very attractive to them. In addition, Nginx can be extended in terms of its functionality, just like Apache, with the use of modules. But pre-built modules are actually only available to folks who are running Nginx Plus, basically people who have paid for the use of the product. Well, folks, that's all I really wanted to say about these alternative web servers that I did mention in class, but of course didn't talk about because we're using IIS to get our feet wet with the idea of a web server and how we work with them. If either Apache or the Nginx web server sound interesting to you, you want to learn more about them, I do encourage you just to look them up online. Loads of information are available about both of those platforms. Networking students, you do have a web server administration course coming up. And software students, you will be using the built-in web server, which I do believe is Apache, if I'm not mistaken, on CS Unix to deploy web apps in your courses as well. So it's not something that you're going to be able to get away from even here in school. All right. Well, I will see you again in class next week. Bye-bye for now.